ask me along the way, please do. Let's make this as interactive as you'd like. And I guess there's time for Q&A afterwards as well. So what I would like to talk about today is the story that from where it started to where we are today, which is not a finished house. So if you're expecting to see finished photos, we're not there yet. But the journey towards a net zero energy retrofit and an addition onto a home with some stories in it. And so that property is shown on the left is the house in its, well, not original form, but this is probably early 1900s actually on this house. And the land that I will be talking about is shown in that picture. That meadow at the bottom will feature in the conversation a little bit. And the house itself is on the other side. You see that barn that's there? It's on the other side of the road from that little barn. And that's Mount Ascutney is the prominent mountain that you can see there. So it's in central Vermont in Reading. And the first thing that I want to say is that as I talk about this story, I'm going to start at the first person who built a fixed structure there, whose name is Moses Chaplin, back in 1782. But this is on the unceded territories of the Western Abenaki peoples. And I don't know that story exactly from their time of many thousands of years moving through this land seasonally to the time that Moses Chaplin built his house. It is something that I'm interested in, but I'm still working on that part. But I just want to acknowledge that that is part of this story that I will not be talking much about. What I should say, and I'm delighted to say my wife Sophie is here as well. So Sophie, thank you for being here. And it has, obviously this is a journey we're on together. Sophie and I have been camping and recreating in that area of Vermont for a very long time, most of our adult lives, and our children also came up and spent time there. And as we're approaching retirement age, we decided that we wanted to build a net zero home in Vermont somewhere, and we were gonna find a place to do that. And we landed on this land, and I will tell you at the front of it, like we purchased this property for the land, not for that house that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. It was this beautiful meadow with those long-range views. The Ascutney's just off to the right. It's gorgeous. And it really felt like the perfect place for us to kind of build this net zero. It had great solar. It was what we wanted, and that's what we were going to do. And then things changed. So when we first purchased the property, I talked to my friend Ed, who's the architect that I told you did the blog, and said, Ed, like we did this one house together the house that we've raised our children in, that we renovated together. Can we work on a net zero house together? And he said, absolutely. And the reason I have a bus there is because Ed and I met each other because we used to take the bus together every day to work, and we just met in our neighborhood this way. And so we had that meadow, and that's where we were going to build. And we started, thinking about the project. And I said, I need to be an informed consumer of information and want to influence all aspects of the project. So I should learn about, if I'm going to use the words net zero at building design, I ought to know a little something about it. And so I signed up for the Yestermorrow class on the recommendation of a friend. And that was fundamental to everything else that happened afterwards. So. And I should just say, Lily was in the class at the same time. And Lily will keep me honest and say that one of the first things that you do in this class is you pitch your project. That is, what design are you working towards that you're going to work it through over the course of the entire project? And so in the first class that I had the opportunity to present, I presented my the design for the house that we had started to sketch out, independent of the architect, because I wanted to work through this myself. And I laid it out, and then the question started. And the first question was what are you going to do with that other house that's on the other side of the road? And I said, well, we're going to live in it until we get the net zero one done, and I don't know what we're going to do afterwards. And then the question was well, so then you're going to have this horribly inefficient house over here and the house up there in the meadow, and yes, and tell me more about the meadow. And as I started to talk about the meadow, what I talked about was the beauty of the meadow, right? We were drawn to the meadow because it was so gorgeous. And one of the first questions, and I will say his name now, and you'll hear him multiple times, Michael Gotank, who was one of the instructors who is still teaching here at Yestermorrow, said, what if you left the meadow as a meadow? And you just worked on the house that was across the way and met all of your programming needs? And I said, well, maybe, but like what I was hearing from people that were looking at this is that that place was a teardown. And so I don't think that we would, that it's possible necessarily. And he said, well, it like starts to challenge some of that. And so then the thinking again kept coming back to like, it's a beautiful meadow. That bear, that coyote, those wildflowers are all from camera photos in that meadow right there. So the animals are clearly using this place. And the more time we spent with this particular property, the more we got to understand who all travels through there. And it's a very busy, lovely meadow. And it should be a meadow, and the forests around it. And we recreated there. And then we started to pay attention to what was happening in the house that we were living in while we were going to build the house in the meadow. And it turns out they're different views, but that view in the center bottom, it's beautiful in its own way. It's just a different set of beautiful views. It also, however, I told you, like people were calling it a teardown, like it was in pretty rough shape, including, the two things that I would say most prominently is the basement was like, would flood seasonally, like you'd get 5 inches of standing water. Yeah, it was just super bad. And the house, you could tell there was rot and mold from the fact that it had been wet so much. And the drying potential was not necessarily, well, drying potential was great, but like it was still, there was plenty of moisture issues. And no doubt there was a lot of rot, and the house leaned to the right, and like there was just, and the mice had really had the run of the place for the last 80 years every winter, and so it was pretty infested. So anyway, there were just a lot of things about it that gave us pause. But we did, with Michael's encouragement and others, end up pivoting. And in fact, I pivoted in the class after the second session to like, okay, I'm going to figure out what a retrofit might look like on this house. And before I say much more about that, I just want to jump into sort of the now space for a second to say one of the things that I had not appreciated at the time that we were making that decision was the opportunity that getting to know that place, that house and its history and the site would give us in terms of a deeper understanding of the significance of that structure in lots of different ways to us. And so I've got pictures of a few things that really speak to some aspects of that. So each one of those pictures there represents one of the generations that gets us from 1782 until today, with very few exceptions. Like it's these families. So Moses Chaplin was the person that I told you. He was a 20-year-old Revolutionary War veteran that with his friend Aaron Kimball came and built that structure. It was the 4th house in Reading up on this hill. And then there was a whole life created around that. And that survey that's up on the left side was the first survey of the property. And that was done in 1806 so that Moses could sell the property to the Forbushes. And so you can see M. Forbush is written on that ceiling dresser, which was hidden up in the ceiling when we ripped down the sheetrock that was up to form the ceiling on the second story. There was M. Forbush. We've discovered Forbush names everywhere, and the Forbushes were there for 2 generations. And then along came the Copelands, and so one day I was out working on the house, and these 2 lovely women were in a car with a gentleman. They were driving slowly by the house, and they stopped their car, and I walked over to say hi to them because it's unusual that someone drives down the road and stops. And so I said hello, and they said, well, we're sorry to trouble you at all, but our mother grew up in this house. And I said, oh, you must be a Copeland. And they were like, how do you know that we're Copelands? And I said, well, I've met people from most of the other families. The one folks that I haven't met anybody from is from the Copelands. Of course, I didn't meet Moses Chaplin, but I knew the story. And so they got out of the car and they said, we'd really love to come and see the house because we knew stories and we'd been in here at one point early on in our lives. And where they're standing, that's the den of the house, was where their mother was married. She came down from the second story and was married in that den. And it was this beautiful moment that can't happen if that house is torn down, right? And so like it's just this wonderful experience for us. And it's one of many that have happened along the way. And I really won't spend much more time on the others other than to say that's the Ashtons that are shown looking lovingly at each other. They bought this house in the 1930s, just after the Copelands, and they were the first people to not occupy it full year. They would only use this as a summer home, and they did this, and then it stayed in their family for generations. And one of those generations was a lovely painter who painted that picture of the house, which is also in the house. And so we've got a bunch of things from their generation in the house. and we have relationships with the family that owned it prior to us. And what our understanding was as we built that relationship with them and as we talked about things is that we're temporary stewards of a property that will hopefully live long after us. And so our job is to do what we can to make it ready for the next 240 years. And so that's been an inspiring journey for us. So back to like getting to work. First thing was to create a master plan. I'm not going to read all this. All I want to say is there were sort of two big elements that drove our thinking. One was around all of the different programming and other sustainability and resilience elements they want, other characteristics that we wanted in the house. And then on the other side, we did use Chris Magwood's sustainable home design, which is probably in the library. I didn't look, but I'm sure it is. And there's a little matrix in there that allows one to set goals around the influence that one wants to have on ecosystem embodied carbon, energy efficiency, and a lot of other things. And so we scored that and we used it as a guide as we were talking about how to make decisions throughout the project. And I'm not going to go into details on those, but I just want to briefly highlight some programming elements that did absolutely influence design. I'm happy to talk more about it later. A little bit on resilience, and then a bit on energy, and then we'll get into the build itself. So programming, without getting into the details of the story, I will say that at the same time that I was coming to Yestermorrow to dive into net zero, I made the decision that I really wanted to spend most of my time in the world of climate, clean energy transition, just transition, and I was doing it for lots of different reasons. But what I have seen through some of that work and what drove me to some of that work was also seeing lots of people who are experiencing climate anxiety, right? Just a general concern about the collapse of our environment and what that augurs for our future. And so I've done some work with various people, and we've created a retreat experience that we're not charging anybody anything for it, but like to come to the property and to work through basically this way of moving from anxiety that people are having to self-authoring their way to engage in affecting and creating the future that we want. And so, and we've worked the land into that, and it's just a wonderful place to be able to do that work. And we did one, and then we've done one other, but when this project is completed, it's something that we plan to do at least a few times a year. And so we needed to be able to accommodate 8 to 14 people on site for each of those, and then community gatherings of larger groups of people that we wanted to have together as well. And so in this particular picture, this is maybe you've heard about the NESI conference that's happening. So NESI does pro tours, and they came to visit our build, and they brought, that was 50 some odd people that came through the project, and we hosted them. So we would love to have groups like this come to the house and, as appropriate, have conversations as well. So, and then of course, family gatherings. Another big driver for us also was being able to age in place. So the original structure was a 1.5-story cape, and so we needed single-story living that was going to be in that net zero house in the meadow, now part of this build. And then some flexibility for what the future holds. So that's the sort of the resilience side. It was taking a step back to say, okay, what is the future that we're likely to head into, and what is that going to mean for this site? And so, again, just as to kind of seed some things that we used in case it's helpful to anyone. I use the probablefutures.org site quite a lot, where you can look at scenarios of different levels of warming. And they have maps for the world basically about what the projections are for different things. And so there are ones that I think we all know, right? And we've experienced in this area an awful lot in the last bit, but wetter for sure, more intense rainfall, flooding, et cetera. Hotter, of course. Also, one that surprised me was, but we're starting to hear more conversations about this now, is wildfire danger days as well. So in this map, like if you plot that and look at where we are, for our house, like we're going to have somewhere between 2 weeks and a month more of wildfire danger days occurring as well. So it's just like these were things that I wanted to be aware of as we were thinking about what we were going to do. And the biggest one for us actually is managing water. We're at the bottom of a very steep hill. When the rains come, that water heads down that hill. How do we manage that through the site in a way that doesn't cause damage to the property, even in torrential downfalls? So that was a bit on resilience. And then, and again, I'm happy to talk more, but But the other part was energy that we talked about, and really there's two pieces of this. So there's the embodied carbon aspect of this, which is like what is the emissions that goes into building the building, and then the second part is the operational emissions of the building once it's running. So when we talk about net zero carbon, net zero energy home, that would be like on an operational basis operating it. But as Chris Magwood and Jacob Rakusin and many others have talked about now for some years, for a while we did that without paying attention to what the emissions were going into the build, and so that matters as well, and it matters even more acutely near term because of the impact, the long-term impact on climate. And so I just want to give a shout out to the Beam tool. How many people here are familiar with this tool? Okay, great. So I'm glad I'm saying it. So there's some rather accessible software that is free to use, or you can make a donation to do it, that was created by the Builders for Climate Action. And this was a group of people that were looking at, like, we're doing all this work and we need to also be paying attention to like how energy intensive is the stuff that we're using in these builds. And so they created this tool. We're now on version 1.1. So when I started using it, it was version 1.0, and 1.1 is better. There's more to it. But basically they get data from manufacturers on in a thing called an environmental product declaration, which has a fixed format about how to figure out how much energy is and emissions and waste and other things are involved in the creation of a material. And so when you build an assembly, you can then figure out how much of a material am I using in that assembly over whatever square footage, et cetera, how energy intensive is it, and thus, how much emissions are associated with that material. And they're only doing, I won't nerd out too much on this, but basically it allows you to look at that. And then so you create your whole assembly in basically an Excel spreadsheet at some level, but they've managed it in a much better interface. And now you can look at, okay, what are the emissions associated with our build, and how does that compare with a standard build? And the thing that they've introduced more recently, which is really great, is to be able to also do comparison scenarios pretty easily, so you can look side by side and just say which one is better. And so I will just hit a few highlights, which is one of the things that we did in our build was to try and reduce concrete use at all, because concrete is one of the biggest emitters in traditional builds. And so we thinned up our stem walls. Instead of being 8 inches, they were 6 inches, and we eliminated the slab altogether and used a different build, which I'll talk about a little bit. And we used slag concrete. So that's a cementitious material. It's a waste product of there's metal refining, and they also can use fly ash, which is from coal plants, et cetera. Those materials are cementitious, and so they can substitute for Portland cement in a concrete mix. And you can get up to 50% of that Portland cement eliminated. And Portland cement is one of the biggest drivers of the CO2 emissions associated with the concrete. And so what I wanted to show here is on one example, so here's the final output of the beam model for how we built the house. And on the right-hand side, I'm not expecting you to look at any of these numbers. I just want to get the concept out there. But what we were able to do is compare, if we did everything that we actually did, and the only difference that we made was instead of using, in this case, it was the concrete slab, because it actually assumes we also use that slide concrete, but we eliminated the concrete slab from the addition. And that, if we had used the slab, we would have increased by 50% the amount of emissions that was associated with the build. So concrete is a big offender. Honestly, if I had to do this all over again, knowing that and now having experience with helical piles that we used for the porch build, I probably would have done the whole addition on helical piles and framed to those and done it and eliminated concrete altogether. I might mention it later, but in case we run out of time, I just want to say, part of my job has been to hunt down materials, working with Michael and others, but Carroll Concrete here in the Upper Valley will do slag concrete. But when I first started asking, everyone was like, no, never heard of it, don't know what you're talking about. I've heard it's not as good. Turns out it's harder, it's better. For finished products, you maybe want to back off on it. If you're trying to do a finished concrete floor look, you might want to back off on the amount of slag. But other than that, great stuff. Takes slightly longer to cure, was no big deal in our build, and it's available in the Upper Valley. So you just need to ask. So, and it's, you can see, big driver. So, and then the other part is the operational net carbon. And so our basic strategy to that, again, and you heard a passive house talk last week, some of you, and so, you you get all this, but like having well air-sealed, thermally efficient homes is a big driver. Like reduce the amount of energy that you need to kind of operate the house, number one. Number two, electrify all of it so that everything is coming through electricity. And then if you can produce the electricity cleanly and you make enough electricity to meet the electricity needs of your house, that's a net zero energy house anyway. And that's where people debate. It's not net zero carbon necessarily because it depends on where all that electricity is coming from, but it's at least net zero energy. And we hope as our grid gets cleaned up, it'll be net zero carbon as well. So that's part of our plan as well. That's our solar array for the home. And the only thing in this that I've called out is the air to water heat pump, which is on the right-hand side as well. So our whole heating and cooling system is a hydronic-based system. And that was developed in collaboration with Jacob Rakusin, who was one of the instructors in the class that Lily and I took together. And I've already mentioned Michael Gotenk, who was another. So I'm just going to pause here to say, like, Yestermorrow's influence was all over this project. It fundamentally altered the way that I and then ultimately Sophie and I looked at the project. It shifted us to work entirely on working on the original house, thinking about embodied carbon. I'd never even heard of it. I didn't really know what net zero energy meant, even though I knew it was a good idea. And so it really allowed us to get deeper into that as well. So, and the gift of all those relationships that are ongoing now. Yeah, please.
What's DHW?
Domestic hot water. So it does hot water too. Yeah. I mean, it's making hot water anyway, and then you're using some of it for your, yeah. So yeah, actually, let's pause there for a second. Like, anything, we good right now? We'll talk about that. Yeah, please.
Did you do radiant floor?
Yeah, so we did radiant floor in the addition that we're going to talk about. The original house, we ducted, and we did two things. We had radiators that were there, and we're reusing those radiators, and that's the primary emitter. And then the second is we have ductwork, which we're going to use for cooling anyway, that we put in because we had it all open, so we could go and put ductwork in. And we're using fan coils then that are doing the heating and cooling if we need it from that system as well. So actually, let's go take a look at these sides of things, and I won't get into total detail on that. I already mentioned this. I'm not going to spend too much time except to, like, this is the original. This is not the original. This is the footprint when we became stewards of this property, which is this is the 1782 house, and then that L that was added onto the back was added on by the Forbushes in the 1830s. And I always like to imagine that Rufus Forbush Sr. was the one that bought it from he was also a Revolutionary War veteran who bought this from Moses. And then his son, Rufus Forbush Jr., was the one that did this. And I like to think about, like, they had like 10 kids that grew up in that originally one-story cape. And I'm sure he was one of those 10 kids, and I can imagine him, like, you know, he became a fairly prominent Reading citizen, and he probably had a little bit of money at the time, and he was like, I'm going to expand this place. I want to have a much larger home. So he added on, the family did, they added on that L as a lovely breezeway. And it sits at the base, as I mentioned. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a big steep hill down behind the house that gets a lot of water. So that's where we were, and so the process began. So I'm calling it taking down and building up. So we gently deconstructed that L that was added there. We saved a lot of the wood, so a lot of the sheathing, all those timbers, we set them aside and said we'll figure out what to do with them later. But we like the fact that that is carbon that was taken out of the atmosphere by the miracle of photosynthesis and is fixed, and we would like to reuse that material rather than having to go get new material where we can. And that got stored in the barn. And then this just shows a footprint of the foundation of the addition that was going onto the back of the original house with the deconstructed L over there. I'm going to talk about this in like two sections. The first is the original house, and then I'm going to move into the addition to talk about that. This is, when we got into the original house, I said there, it had been getting a lot of water, and that water in a lot of ways. There was the groundwater issues in the basement that I talked about, and there was also you know, the roof clearly hadn't done its job for the life of the house, and the eaves were not, there were not significant overhangs, so like all that water would just run down the face. And that lower picture in the bottom right, like the whole side, all the sheathing, part of the beam, the sill was all rotten on the north side of the house. And so like we had to like get in there and take out a lot of that rot, and did repair on the sill beam, and reframe basically in, you know, studs for the where in the timber frame that was missing studs. And so there was a bunch of sill repair that needed, or rot in general, that needed to be done. And then I wish that I had the ability to do video here, but like there was this, so the house also leaned to the south, and we were, as you'll see, we built a roof over the roof. We framed a new roof, so it was, we put a ridge beam and posts down, and then framed a new roof over the top. But the house leaned so much that we couldn't set the post down and land on the footing that we had at the bottom. We needed to get the south side to come back to do that. And so Dylan and Sky from Snow Dog Construction, Michael's team, like cut the gable end wall away from the roof and then winched it back in and pulled it in, and then sawed off the rest of the sheathing on the roof side to get it back in, not into plumb, but like on that side so that we could drop the post on there. It was this incredible feat, and the video is hysterical. Okay, so I alluded to this, but in the original house, it was like kind of a few basic things that we wanted to do. One was to put on a jacket and hat concept. So that was, we insulated to the outside. So we put TJIs on the exterior sheathing that fattened out the house to the outside. We sheathed those TJIs. I'm just going to stick with the walls for a second, and then taped them. And that was what our air barrier was. And there's more details in that. And then we filled between the old sheathing and the new sheathing with dense packed cellulose. And so, because I just told you, like the house leans and there's all kinds of things going on, but it's now straight, level, and plumb, but the other part isn't. And so the thickness of the walls changes. And so the R value varies a little bit too, but we got a minimum of R41 in there, R43 or so. And I'm estimating we're at R73 or more on the north side where it leans this way, and we get a really big fat wall at the top. So, but you really, like from the outside now, you cannot tell, but you can tell. Well, you can't even tell so much from the inside now because we've done some framing in there too. And then the other side was the hat. So the hat was, we now, as I said, we put a ridge beam across the top. We dropped posts down both sides. And then the TJIs were also used again as rafters. So now we had a lower pitch roof and a steeper pitch roof over the top of that. Again, in that case, the air barrier was at the original surface of the original sheathing of the original roof. And then we framed over top of that. We put a membrane on top of that framing, and then we strapped that, and then zip went on top of that. So we had a ventilated roof assembly, and we had this big, thick airspace that we could also fill with cellulose. And in this case, we didn't have to dense pack it because it was in continuous contact with the air layer, for those of you who do that kind of stuff, just by loose fill. But it was pretty well packed in there. And then there you get a minimum of R50 at the very narrow part of the eaves, the lowest part, and it's probably over 100, honestly, at the peak by the time you get up to there. So we put a lot of bags of cellulose in the house. Yeah, please.
TJI.
Yeah.
Just like the strap, it's like an extra wall assembly on the outside. What is TJI?
Yeah. Okay. So TJI is this thing right here. So it's an eye joist. So it's got two thicker pieces of wood that are joined by a thin piece of strand board material or some kind of material in between, and that can get screwed on to the outside of the house,
It's not
right?
structural, like, so that secondary
Correct.
is not on that structurally. That's not sitting on a foundation.
It is not, exactly. It's hanging out over the original house, basically.
The original
Yeah.
house, you maintain that on a fieldstone foundation?
It is a fieldstone foundation. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Good question. And the weight of the new roof, the roof is being carried down by that by the new ridge beam that we put, and there's posts actually on either side and one through the middle of the house as well. And so that carries the load for the added roof, basically. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks for the question.
And we hung the old roof to the new roof
Also true. There are straps that tie, yeah.
to help with all that cellulose we were piling on top.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you, Sophie. Good point.
And your windows stayed inside?
Yeah, great question too. So this is before the window. So we did replace the windows in this case. And those windows are being set a little further out into, because we now have this deep window well. They were set out about 2/3 the way into the framing. These are the old windows here. Yeah, absolutely. And so in the spirit of like things we were adding, we did a hat and we did a jacket and we also did a visor. So we added a porch. Although if you remember back to the original photo that I showed you, there was a porch on the house in the early 1900s. I'm pretty sure we all have agreed, as we talked about as a team, that like, so that had like a roof, that was this way, an A frame sort of bit on the front, and it was clearly leaking in and around the chimney a lot, and I'm guessing they just got tired of dealing with the leaks. The valley was in a very bad place relative to the chimney as it stood. So that came down, that framing came down, and the little porch that was on the front came off. So anyway, we added a porch. It does a lot for the experience of the house, and also it does provide a bit of a visor for the western sun for most of the day. You still get a little bit of light coming in, but it's quite nice. And galoshes, so I talked about that incredibly wet basement, so we had to go after that as well. So we basically, in the upper picture is like what the flooding looks like, and the bottom picture is after we put down 20 millimeter plastic and actually 2 layers of it and taped everything up, and there's now a good functioning sump pump that is in the lowest spot, which it wasn't before, and it's got a triple backup so that even if we lose power, or actually there's 3 different pumps, and if one fails, the next one kicks in, and if that one fails, the next one kicks in, and we've got battery backup on that as well. And so that's been handy. And so now basically water, we just have treated the foundation walls and to the outside. This is Michael Gotink's, like the way that he likes to think about it is you just treat all that as if it's the outside now. And so the water that comes in goes underneath that plastic and runs to the sump. And it's held up very well. We've had some other weird issues, but they have nothing to do with that system that I think we've totally sorted out now. So let's hope. So that's sort of the basics of the original house. And then we had the addition, and Snowdog is a great team, pretty small team. And it was all that I was working with them on that. Like it was all that we could do to like do that original house. And meanwhile, like I was all, we were living there and thinking about like, there's the whole addition, and like, we haven't even started framing this. And like, I don't know if this is going to be done before my natural expiration date hits. And so we had a conversation and realized we needed to explore different options. And we landed on the following after some time, which was doing offsite construction. So we entered into a relationship with Benson Wood, who's in Walpole, New Hampshire, and they do fabrication of panels that can then be brought on site and assembled. So that's what I want to just briefly talk to you about. So, but it took a little bit of conversation. This was not their typical build. Like we had a whole bunch of things that, like we didn't have a standard size foundation. We didn't have a slab. We didn't have a basement. We were doing super insulation that, we really wanted to push what they could do in terms of insulation. Air tightness was going to be really important to us. It was an entirely vapor open assembly for people who think about those things. Vaulted ceilings that are ventilated. Like, there was a lot of stuff that really had them, and particularly they were going to have to build something that was going to attach to the original house perfectly so that it looked like it was seamless between the two. And so that's asking a lot of them, as opposed to like if they're just building the whole thing by itself. But now this had to marry up to the original house. And so, like it was a little bit of a conversation, but they were game to do it. And it meant everybody had to be on board. So builders, architects, us as clients, and Benson Wood to get together to do that. So we decided to do it. And just in brief on their process, the first thing they do is they build it all on the computer, and like literally every stud, every framing member, everything that they are going to create is on the computer. And all I'm showing in this case is the wood elements of the structure here. But of course, they have this for every layer of detail, including all the insulation and the weather-resistant barrier that they wrap and the strapping they put in the outside and the zip that goes on the roof, and like it's all there. And a lot of it, the cutting and everything is automated. It's not all automated, but there's a lot that is automated. And we had the pleasure of being able to go to the facility and watch them build our building inside of a building, right? So it was December and January. It was awfully cold outside, but they were all working in this nice climate-controlled environment. And so, I'll just like highlight a couple places. So like this is a roof panel right here where this is the dormer actually on the garage. And so this is like just the roof part. And this is the insulated part that's over the living space, where you can see like that's a deep member, and then that's all. This is a machine that will blow cellulose in, so it kind of moves along and just blows cellulose into the section and dense packs it. And then they have QC that makes sure they got enough cellulose in there, and they do that for roof panels and they do it for wall panels. It also gets. Sophie's actually looking through a window. This is in the loft over the garage, and they will install many of the windows that get done there. And again, when you're really trying to get your air control right and you're able to do everything in a nice controlled environment, you can get a pretty nice tight seal on windows. So they installed a lot of the windows, and that's obviously got the weather-resistant barrier that will keep water off, et cetera, when it's installed, and then it's strapped and it's ready to get siding on the outside. So comes in panels, and that's me pointing to like our shrink-wrapped panels that are sitting outside ready to go. And then the next thing that happens is after building it inside of a building, I probably won't go into this. We can come back to it later. This is just the details of like what their panels look like when they're walls and roof. The most important thing is that they are ready to go. Like they get dropped on, and as soon as you get the air seal right between each of the panels, and you get it to be an integral envelope, it is fully insulated. It is ready to be sided on the outside and to be finished on the inside. And there's one handy little thing that they do, which is all of their inside layer, which is where their air control is, which is a piece of plywood, basically. They strap out from that. So you always have, and then you put your siding, you put your finished sheetrock on the inside of that. You get a nice utility chase in there, so it's really easy for the electricians and everything to be able to run wires and have space behind. So it was a really handy little bit that they did. So anyway, and it's quite well insulated. I'll say not quite as well insulated as the original house. And then we had to get ready for Benson wood. And so remember I said we had this slabless construction. And so basically that's the foundation walls that are concrete. There's sand in between there. We're not going to put a slab down because we're trying to eliminate concrete. So it gets 2 layers of plastic. And then the joists, the floor joists go in there. And eventually, and all the the utility, the underfloor conduits and everything were all run. And then after we get a roof overhead and we're weathered in, then we're going to insulate that floor system with dense packed cellulose. So, which again, cellulose is a carbon sequestering component. So it's nice to be able to actually put a bunch more carbon back into the house and store it in a fixed way. I put the picture in the third one over from the left just to say so if you could see a close-up of that, so there's a little floating inner tube in there, and if you could see the close-up, there's a frog in there too. Like I came out one day, because it's the buildability of this aspect was not necessarily amazing, because as soon as you put that plastic sheet in there, you've created effectively a swimming pool, and so when it rains, it fills up, and so I spent a lot of my time vacuuming out the water after rains, and we would go back to work. So, and then of course we had to dry the whole thing out after we got it all weathered in. So I would probably figure that out a little differently as well. That said, I'm really happy with the result, but there are things to optimize in that process as well, for sure. Okay, then it comes on trucks, and they bring a crane, and those panels get lifted in place, and they get attached to each other, and they do the walls first, as you would imagine, and then they work their way up. They put the floor where there's a second story, and then drop the roof panels in. And this is all happening in January, and it's snowing, and it's raining, and there's an ice storm all in the time that they were doing this, and they just keep going, and we shovel off the snow, and we keep building. And eventually, there's a fair amount of moisture that you're going to dry out. We just got some dehumidifiers in and dried it out afterwards once we got weathered in. But just some stats on this. It was 1.5 days from the time that they showed up to the time that they had the first floor walls up. It was 18 days, calendar days, from the start of the site assembly to the time that they left, basically. And it took 6 weeks from the time that they cut the very first board at Bensonwood to the time that they were done on site and drove away. So there was a lot of work that went into getting ready for that. And we're trying to marry, you know, those two houses and get all this right and precision build this. But like, you know, we remain impressed with the ability to kind of pull that off. And they started midstream too. This wasn't a house that they designed. This was one where we brought them plans and said, you know, we were going to build this another way. Now we want to build it with your system. And here, by the way, it needs to look like this. And so, you know, like, it was a lot of work getting ready for that, but, you know, pretty impressive. We were quite impressed with the experience. I do want to emphasize that, you know, when you're putting those panels together, there's places where if you don't get that just right, like there's going to be air leaks and other things, and that can be problematic. It's also, it could be water leaks, et cetera. And so we did use blower door assisted air sealing. So we created negative pressure in the house. We were able to find places where there were leaks and get those all sealed up. And then we went ahead and insulated the floor. And you asked about radiant flooring, and actually that, you can see that system over there. That's warm board panels that are down. That's the subfloor, and there's tracks in there in which we can snap the tubing that allows the radiant flooring to work, basically. And that's got aluminum plated wood, basically plywood, so that it'll distribute the heat evenly across the subfloor. And then the rest of the windows and the doors went in. So I just briefly, in the last little bit here, want to talk about like what we're working on now, which is sort of repurposing and reusing material and doing the finish work. And so a couple of examples of repurposing. So remember I told you we took down the original addition, that L, and we saved all the timbers and we figured out what to do with them. And so our nephew is a timber framer, and he said, I would love the opportunity to do something with those timbers. And we figured out a truss system that could go into the great room, which is shown. So he came and showed up, you know, with timbers like this stacked up in the yard. He started ripping timbers so that he could get them to be the right dimension to be able to put them up against. They're not going to be structural, but he wanted them to look structural, so he's going to put them up against the interior of the great room ceiling. That's him working with a couple of folks to kind of do the layout, other people from the Snow Dog team, to create these trusses that are on the right-hand side now up in the great room that was assembled. So it was a wonderful sort of reuse of the material, but in a different way than it was in the original building. We're really, really happy with them. And Jay he's a master. It was great. And just a couple of other pieces, like on the right-hand side, like that's the old kitchen sink. It's now the sink in the bathroom. Like we're reusing things wherever we can that is still usable. The floor will be a whole nother story. It's not done yet, but we took up all the old floors. They are being planed and cleaned up, and they're going to come back in and be repurposed. That's what they will look like. They were painted before that, so it's really great to kind of reveal what the beauty of the original wood was. And it's like, you know, 240-year-old wood by and large. It's amazing stuff. And the folks who are working on that genuine wood floors out of New Hampshire are just incredible. And then in the middle, Nell, who's a member of the Snow Dog team, but also does carpentry on the side of different kinds, used some of the material that we took out to build that vanity, which is going to go underneath that sink in that bathroom. And so like that's all old wood from the house that got reused to make a vanity, which is super fun. And then, you know, we're working on the finish now. There's a proper metal roof on. Cladding work is starting. That's that air-to-water heat pump. So we were able to get away with one compressor on the outside for the full heating and cooling. Some of the finished floors are in. We're working on some of the sheathing is going to be used to be paneling on that room that we're calling the great room that has those trusses. We're reusing some of that sheathing to come back in as basically cladding on the interior. And the cabinets have arrived, and we're trying to figure all that stuff out now. So that's where we're at. I do blog about the story of the house a lot. If you're interested in the history of the house, even more detail, there's more in there and choices along the way. It's greendreamstories.com. And like I said, we're doing these climate retreats. And if there's somebody here who says, I am anxious about climate and I would love to have an intergenerational experience with some other folks to talk about how I might engage, we would love to have you. Again, there's no cost to it. It's just you come and hang out in the property and do some good work together. And so my email is there. I think the last thing I want to end with is the gratitude that I have for so many folks along the journey to date. And in particular, there are many other people that were involved in this project, but everyone who is mentioned here, the company and the people, are people who had to do something different to make this happen that was related to green building in different ways. Like there's just a couple of examples, like Legacy Plumbing and Heating had never done an air to water heat pump system before, but they wanted to learn because they knew that heat pumps in general, and particularly air to water, if done right, could be a really great solution for the area, and they wanted to be able to offer that. So they were younger folks who were eager to learn, and we wanted to work with people like that so that that could cascade out into the community in different ways. And so, that's an example. Richard Electric, who's on there, I didn't want to upgrade the service to the house we already had a 200 amp service at the house, and I've done enough work with electrification to know that that should be adequate, even though it's a big house. But if you do a standard load calculation for a house like this, it says you must upgrade to 400 amps. But there's now smart panels that are out there, and there are varying levels of smart panels that will do load shedding that will basically say, let's not assume that we're going to run all things at once. And in fact, but to make sure you're comfortable, we'll make sure that if you're trying to do all things at once, but we'll turn off the car charger for the hour that we might have exceeded the capacity for your house. And it's so much less expensive to do this smart panel that we're doing than it would have been to upgrade to 400 amps. Plus it's like building infrastructure that you don't need for this weird eventuality that isn't going to happen, but the loads say you do. So an electrician can't, if they do the load calc, they're gonna say, I have to do this 400 amp service. But it's been a collaboration with this electrician, again, a person who was ready to learn, to say, well, you'll have to show it to me. And then the salesperson helped him understand it. They did load calcs together. It went all the way up to the GMP Innovation Center head, who said, we've never seen this used for avoidance of an upgrade in a residential setting, but it's cool. Yeah, you guys can totally do that. So, and it was, a third the cost to be able to do that compared to doing an upgrade. So there are many stories like that in here of people who are willing to just maybe think a little bit more outside of their set of experiences because they know that there are innovations that are coming and they wanted to do that. Those are the people that we wanted to work with. We're grateful to have worked with people like that. So yeah, and I guess I just want to emphasize how important Yestermorrow has been for this journey all the way through, and it's really quite wonderful for me to be able to come here and to speak to all of you. So, questions, please. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
How much square footage is the finished home?
The finished home is 4,000 square feet if you include the garage and the loft above it.
And how well is the air-to-water heat exchanger working?
Amazing. I can't quantify it for you yet because we don't have any emitters in the original house yet at all. However, we got through winter with that air to water heat pump putting radiant into the addition, and there was enough heat, and because it's so airtight and well insulated, it was fine on the other side. So Sophie says, fine, yeah, you might want to put a space heater on every now and again. Yeah, that's true. See, I love it. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, but even that performance, I know that once we're all done, it's going to be fantastic. That particular system is a Space Pack, which is out of Westfield, Mass. There are others as well. I think, I want to come back to we talked about radiant and reusing the radiators. One of the things that we were able to get away with reusing the radiators, which were designed, by the way, for that house when it was a super leaky old home, for 180 degree water, and the sizing was such that it would emit enough BTUs to be able to heat that house. So now the water that's going to circulate is 130 degrees, and it isn't even linear. It drops off quite dramatically on the emitter side of things. So those shouldn't, if this was just a swap over, it would not work to be able to do that. But because we made the house so much tighter and more insulated, we could get away with, we don't need very many BTUs per room to be able to get our heat loss met at design temperature. And so we could get away with using that in that case. We have a
For the heat exchanger.
for the air to water heat pump. If No, if that thing gets, if somebody drops a rock on that compressor,
Let's say it gets 20 below zero, is it still working?
I haven't seen 20 yet. It's rated definitely down to minus 17, I want to say. They might be minus 22. It's one of the two. Our design temperature, 99% of the time in Reading, we spend at 0 degrees or warmer. So, and this winter, we were okay. So,
And the issue with the
sorry,
design
yeah.
temperature is that if you get to that minus 20 degree, your machine is still working. It's just not putting out the
Same.
BTUs per dollar, whatever
Yeah.
it is. It's just less efficient. It's in first gear trying to go uphill, but it's putting out some heat. So if you have the super insulation that you have,
Right.
It'll be enough BTU.
Right. So an experiment I am going to do next year when we have this house as we want it and zoned the way we want it, for sure, is I'm going to turn off the heating system altogether on a cold week, and I'm going to look at the temperature. And Sophie won't join me for that week because she will find that to not be very fun. But what I want to know is, because we also designed, we've got good solar. I didn't talk anything about this, but to the passive stuff that you heard last, like we've got great southern exposure, hot eaves. Like that great room warms up tremendously in the winter just from the passive solar gains. But now already, as we're getting near the equinox, the sun's getting higher and we're not getting that same sun, which is good because we don't want to have that kind of heat gain now that we're getting into the temperatures we have now. So I just want to see how long the house can go without any heat input to know, will I ever have to worry about that house freezing? The model suggests we may not have to. I want to know whether or not that's the case. And then I want to just say one other thing is, if we do, because I talked about a chimney, we put a wood stove in. Wood stove in a tight house, what are you doing? The system is designed so that it gets all of its air from the outside. There's a makeup air kit. It's got a pipe, comes right into the back of the stove. And when the stove is closed, that's airtight to the chimney, and so it just goes right out. So in the worst case, if we're there, we can start a fire. If we're not there, that's why I want to know, is the house ever going to freeze? Do I ever have to worry about that, basically? Sorry, yeah. Was there more you wanted to ask on that? Or comment?
I
Yeah.
guess the answer is there is no secondary heat on the heat pump.
Correct. The heat pump is on the heat pump, yes, that's correct. Yeah. And we don't have batteries, which is another question that I sometimes get. And it's not that I'm ruling them out. It's that I want to wait and see what the house needs before I size the batteries. Because, for example, if I don't need heat in terms of preventing freezing of pipes, I don't know that we want to put batteries in to be able to manage that load as well, right? Like if I only need a well pump and a septic pump and my cooking and refrigeration and that kind of stuff, that's a very different load profile than if you're trying to back up for heat pumps. Use a lot at cold temperatures of electricity. So I'm going to wait and see how much I need. Yeah.
And we do have that backup system of the little tiny wood stove. So if it's 20 below for a long time and we're feeling chilly, we could light the wood stove.
Yeah.
As an addition.
Yeah.
As a just to sort of add, to the heat of the space. The heat pump will keep working and it's probably going to be fine. We can put on a sweater, but we do have that wood stove to give a little oomph. But also, if we wait 6 hours, once the sun starts shining, it's going to warm up.
It warms up. Yeah.
They also say that if you think it's going to be a really cold day, you are concerned about it, throw a party, invite a lot of people.
Yeah, right. No joke. Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe bake during the day.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's actually true. Yeah. BTUs are BTUs, however you get them. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. Exactly. We've got one pretty good sized, cuddly one. Yeah. Bella keeps us warm. Yeah.
When is the house complete? You're near to.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't answer that question, especially in front of my wife, because I really don't know. Yeah.
Because, you renovated an old house.
Yeah.
And you made it net zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they buy an old house, they have separate goals.
Yeah.
Like what your goal is.
Yeah.
To be net zero.
Yeah.
Usually, like someone who buys an old house, their goal is preservation.
Yeah, yeah,
which is very different than
100%,
your approach.
100%.
Obviously,
Yeah,
it looks like there was some consideration for the historical, but if
this is not a
if we were to
preservation
have
job.
two
Yeah,
different architects here,
yeah,
with one that's more in the energy
yeah.
camp and one's more on the historic preservation.
Right.
What do you think that argument would look like?
Yeah, it would be pretty brutal, actually. Yeah, I predict. Like, thank you for pointing that out. Like, this is so not a historic preservation project. I have to say, and I was very clear, Sophie and I were at the front end with Michael, the builder, and with Ed, the architect, that that was not what we were trying to do, that we were okay. And there's no historic commission that oversees residential homes in Reading. So like, we didn't have to deal with that. If you were in Woodstock right up the way, it would be a different story. That said, like, I understand the value of historic preservation, so I'm not saying that we're against it. I think one of the things that has been interesting to me, I'm imagining those two architects having that debate, and we'll let them have it because it would be pitched. One thing that I have been interested in is the level of, that house that I showed that was in early 1900s doesn't look anything like the house in 1780 something. We've now figured out that those windows that we were talking about, those original windows that we were taking out, were definitely end of Civil War, because we know on the mechanisms that were used and what was being used at the time. But we also know, based on like some framing and some other things, that those were not the original windows. So what was original? They put a porch on, they took a porch off. The chimneys have moved around. There were more chimneys and there was a central fireplace at one point. Like it's none of it's original. What are we preserving? So that said, the other side of it would be, there's value in each of those elements, and we do intend to bring those sashes back in different ways. Like, we're gonna find ways to use this material, but like, it's not being preserved. And you would take some energy hit for a full preservation, no question.
Yeah.
But you could probably get a pretty comfortable house too.
Whose windows did you use?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I feel a little bad that I didn't have Sublime on here. And so I just want to give a shout out to Sublime Windows, who I met at the NESI conference the year after, like in 2022. It was an independent person who is an engineer and architect, Scott Baum. And he said, I think I can offer triple glazed windows that are, that will meet the quality standards that I have. He does individual testing of his own. He gets, his windows tested as well. But he went right to the suppliers. So they're Polish windows. A lot of the good triple pane windows are coming out of Eastern Europe. So he has a Polish manufacturer, and he deals directly with them. And so it cuts out one level. And we got these windows for a third of what I would have paid if I'd been getting them from many of the other folks that we're quoting. So, and that said, Scott, it's a one-person operation. He stands behind his product. We had a couple small issues. He came right up to deal with them. It's been great.
But it is a tilt-turn window?
Tilt-turn windows, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and they're amazing so far, really great, yeah.
How do you like them 2/3 of the way in versus on the outside or the inside?
Yeah, I'll let Sophie also answer. I think from a window, having particularly in the old house, the original house where we fatten out the walls so much, they're thicker walls there. Having that deeper window well is a really lovely thing. It's a spot where you could, you could sit up there, you can put cups of tea in there. It's a very welcoming thing. And then having them recessed a little bit from the outside is both from a weather protection standpoint and also just the look of it. Like, it looks nice. We like it a lot. It was very intentional about where they were placed, from how it would look from the outside and what it did to the inside. I would say the outside dominated, actually. That was the choice. I don't know, so far so good. We're not at finished materials though yet. Like, the sills aren't in on the outside, and we haven't, the jambs are there, but we haven't done finish work on them. So I reserve the right to change my mind. But so far we like it a lot. I'm glad they're not all the way in. I think that would look really weird that we'd have these dark cavernous things, and it wouldn't do much for the inside. And I'm also glad not to have them all the way to the outside. So yeah, pretty good. Great.
How thick are the walls?
Yeah, great question. I should know this off the top of my head. Like, at least 16 on the original house, at least 16 inches if you go from like the 2x4. Yeah, they're big fat monsters. Yeah. And we were talking earlier about sound dampening when you start to insulate. Like it's incredible. Like our dog used to hear, we all did. Like we knew every car that drove by, and I could tell you, oh, there goes Kirby to work, and like here goes wherever. And then we got the cellulose in, and then we did the windows, and suddenly like our dog he can barely hear when anybody comes in the driveway anymore, and we cannot. Like it's actually sometimes awkward where like people will be out there waiting. If there's no doorbell or anything, like they're waiting, so they're waiting for us to show up, and like we're not hearing them. It's really quite remarkable. So, yeah.
You showed us
Yeah.
insulation on the outside where you stuck the TJ.
Yeah, TJIs go to the outside. Yeah.
What'd you do on the new construction?
Yeah, good. So that was they use TJIs as well for their framing members.
Just,
Well, it's like in the wall.
it is the wall.
It is the wall, basically. So from the inside, it would be sheetrock, that utility chase that I told you, the oriented strand board plywood, like a TJI outside of that, and then it's a continuous wood fiberboard insulation that gets attached to those TJIs. The middle is filled with cellulose, and then that gets a weather-resistant barrier on the outside of it. And are they load-bearing? Yeah, interesting question. I don't know. So there must be some. So I know what you're saying. There's something I'm missing. There's a piece of framing that I'm missing. I want to go to the detail that I didn't do. So this is. Can I zoom while I'm doing this? It's going to be hard to look at. Okay, 1x3 vertical strapping, WRB, the wood fiber board, 9.5-inch I stud, which is an I joist, dense packed cellulose, the OSB, and the service chase. That's pretty much what I said. So I guess it must be. Yeah, they're load bearing. Yep. Yep. Wrap it up, Chrissy says. Let's go. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
I welcome everybody to hang out, enjoy, keep the conversation going, but also want to give people the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
Leave if they would like.
Exactly.
So thank you all for being here.
Thank you for your interest. Appreciate it. Thanks.